How you doing, Thumper?
It's good. How are you doing today?
Doing excellent. Glad we could come by.
Appreciate the opportunity to share my opinions.
Yes, sir. And that's what we're here for, to give people who feel like they didn't have a voice the platform to have a voice.
I think a lot of times most of us have a voice, but through a lot of the media oppression, people just are afraid to stick up. I do agree with President Trump when he calls most of his supporters and most of middle America the silent majority. I also like the ideal of you guys being local and giving voices to Oklahomans. I think a lot of middle Americans are left out. I think a lot of the mainstream media considers us flyover states, and they don't
Yes.
take our word. That's why they want to abolish the electoral college, because they want to take our right to express our opinions and our voice.
We felt that during the new primary election, the way they tried to manipulate the voting and having no notary needed for the absentee ballot voting.
I support absentee balloting in a sense that you have to apply for it, so it's not just blanketed shipped. I don't like mail order voting, because you can't track it.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen reports from different news organizations where, especially like in Las Vegas, where you have postal workers just throwing them away, finding them in dumpsters, and that's where you have voter fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have a belief that if the mainstream media is going to push back against voter fraud, then there's probably abundant amount of voter fraud.
That's what we feel too. In fact, that when we looked at the unemployment fraud that was going on, Oklahoma regularly deals with a large number on an annual basis, not just because of COVID-19, people trying to apply for unemployment and it not be the real person.
It's frustrating as a taxpayer to see taxes go up. We vote for politicians claiming to make changes. They don't. I still don't understand how that kind of fraud can be so abundant.
Mm-hmm.
Every morning, at least, not every morning, but a few times a week, the commissioner of the Employment Commission here in Oklahoma is on Channel 5, 9, or whatever. She claims to be doing, her part to help with the system, the broken system, excuse me, but I still see, if you come on once a week or twice a week, then the system's not repaired, and you're not doing much to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But
The engagement needs to be noticeable
absolutely.
in order for the progress to be to the people.
I think the unemployment system in this state and most every state's broken. The fact that we pay into it, but we can be denied, especially in a right-to-work state.
Right.
Sorry, if your employer can fire you for whatever reason with no justification, then I should be able to, quit a job and file for unemployment for whatever reason and no justification. That's what I'm paying in for.
Right, that's exactly right. And when people, like right now for this COVID-19, I know that there's certain examples that wouldn't be necessarily the right thing to see. Like if you saw somebody who hadn't really worked and they noticed the whole wave of people filing for unemployment, and they decided, let me try. There's certain ways now that if you weren't initially on the regular basis allowed to file for unemployment, people who never worked were able to file for unemployment to get the $600 from the
which is
government.
Extremely fraudulent and also frustrating, because as a K1 business owner myself, I don't necessarily pay unemployment or go on payroll tax like the average business owner. And they have claimed several times that you could call or go online, someone such as myself could apply, but those are not options on their website. So if you go down to the Employment Commission, you might get there at 6 a.m., they open at 7:30, take in 10, 15 people and send everyone else home.
Right.
So my thing, I personally feel, is just let's address the citizens, but let's get these business owners in there first so that they can reopen and get some of these people applying for unemployment back in the workforce.
Exactly.
But
and the new stimulus package they're talking about would be a good pathway to get that to work, where they're saying by getting out of unemployment, you will also be compensated, giving them the back to work bonus. That's right.
I don't think people should be incentivized to go to work. That should be something that we need to do. Even if your job was taken away from you from the coronavirus, it doesn't make sense that you should be paid to go back to work. The idea with the stimulus packages, I'm kind of for and against at times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of a stimulus packages with $1,200 per person because it puts our children, our grandchildren in debt further. But more importantly, I remember 8, 9 years ago, Trump's been in office, so 8 to 12 years ago, when I don't remember which administration, but I believe it was the Bush administration bailed out the banks, and we bailed out the entire banking. Good morning, Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo.
Right.
Now the
Yes.
country needs a bailout. Where are they?
No, you're
They're
right.
not bailing us out. They're not giving landlords a break on their mortgage. They're foreclosing on people. The fact that the American people 10 to 12 years ago bailed out the banking industry and they're not helping us out is just offensive.
Man, yes. No, I've never even looked at it at that angle, and that is so true. I'm amazed that with the way things have gone, that we would be giving people more money to be able to spend or allocate to more debt when in reality this wasn't necessary if the people who had been bailed out originally, who make the top 10% of the money in the world, were able to come back and help out a country that helped them get back into where they needed to be.
I was watching a podcast, and I don't remember whom it was. I believe it was Larry Elder, but I don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But whomever it was saying that if someone like a Richard Dell or a Bill Gates were simply just, they have billions of dollars, 50, $100 billion. If you really wanted to end poverty and change the dynamic of America and the culture, one of those individuals, instead of, let's say Bill Gates, instead of giving $500 million to the World Health Organization that does nothing for the world, you can give every American just $1 million and instantly see this country change.
Yeah.
You don't need to distribute the wealth. You just need to help some people out. But he further made a further point, that is, even if you give people $1 million, certain people are still going to be in poverty because they're going to go buy televisions and shoes and not buy a mortgage or a car or life insurance and those sort of things. So what I'm trying to say is, I guess, that it doesn't matter what you do for a living, what wealth or pay gap or wage bracket you're in. If you don't conserve and manage your money correctly, you're going to be a failure. You made a point a moment ago about the top 5%. I don't begrudge the top 5% because they are literally living the American dream. Not everyone in the top 5 or 6% of the world's wealth comes from money. Richard Dell, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, these are Warren Buffett, these are self-made millionaires or billionaires in most of their cases. Same with Sam Walton from the Walton family.
Right.
So it's odd when you hear these people just continuously attack the wealthy while not understanding, quite frankly, that they're the reason why they're indebted or they're poor.
Right. No, and I agree. No, and that's why I was more aiming towards the 10% that were going more for the debt collection and credit cards, where when they did hit that hole, and we bailed them out as far as America went, they bailed out these credit card companies, and then there's no payback, there's no acknowledgement to it, and even to the point where they help fund certain activist groups that will also be anti, what I would imagine, American, and protests and certain stuff.
Well, the Occupy Wall Street movement in itself is both an anti-American and anti-capitalist movement. If it wasn't for America or capitalism in the first place, they wouldn't have that opportunity to have the movement. Years ago, I was one of the founding members of the Central California Tea Party, and we were called, a terrorist organization, a racist organization. And I tried to explain to them that we were specifically created to push back against the Occupy Wall Street movement, and just everyone needs to have a voice, and there's always a counterpoint to every point that someone makes.
Right.
And it is unfortunate, though, that we live in a time where if you don't believe in what another individual believes, they can call you something that you're not, a pejorative, and it's really just fascism. They're just trying to shut you up.
Right.
And speaking up about, like, what we're doing now about, in this particular part, about, us bailing the banks out, being there, reinvesting in them. Where are they to reinvest in us? That's why we need to say something. I saw this morning that the Dow finally re-hit 2,600. It's up about 156 points than it was yesterday. And I see that the stock market's increasing. Wealth is being accumulated, but it's not being distributed evenly, in a sense, not of a liberal, democratic way. But again, if we invested in these automobile companies and these banking companies, these financial institutions, where are they at for us today? Why isn't Chevrolet, which took the biggest bailout money, telling its customers, look, we understand there's a corona, you might have lost your job, you might be furloughed. Not only do you not owe us anything for 3 months, but you for the 3 months that you do owe us, we're not going to charge you interest.
Oh wow, yes, that's right.
Why aren't they stepping up? We want to say these people are our neighbors, but at the end of the day, they're really not. They live in gated communities on the outskirts of town, and they don't even send their kids to the same schools that we send our kids to, but they demanded a bailout.
Right.
And now that we, the people, need some sort of financial bailout for mortgage or PPE loans or whatever it may be, they're nowhere to be found. I don't like the idea of the banking industry anyway. I try not to use them.
No, yes.
I give them my money. They take my money, make investments, make billions of dollars, and then give me my money back with no interest paid or very little interest. I use banks because I have to, owning a business, but most of the time I try to find other avenues to
That's smart. That's smart move.
save
though.
my money.
So, Thumper, right quick,
Yes.
our new episode that's coming out is basically on the premise of why you can't ignore politics anymore. And definitely in a college town, one of our biggest obstacles is trying to get people more interested and more involved in something that definitely affects their life. What would your position be on that?
Well, the problem with getting more people involved in politics is, which they need to be involved in. The number one thing I try to tell people is if you don't vote, then you really don't have a right to complain about Trump or Obama or Bush. If you don't vote, then you can't complain that there's too much police brutality or there's unneeded parking tickets or anything like that. And voting is important. But the problem that we have in America today is most of Gen Y or millennials are fed propaganda or misinformation, and they go into these voting booths with an ideal that they're trying to end systemic racism when racism systemically hasn't existed in 60 or 70 years in this country. But they just regurgitate whatever they hear on The Daily Show or Bill Maher or MSNBC.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because these individuals, these young kids who we want to get voting, they don't want to really educate themselves. We live in a day and age where kids don't want to pick up a book to read. They'll just pull out their phone and Google it. Well, that's not a bad thing. The problem with that is most of the time Google takes you to Wikipedia, which isn't run by a secure organization. I can change something on Wikipedia. And if someone goes and, for instance, someone changes on Wikipedia even for 8 hours that Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat, which he was not, and 80,000 to 150,000 voting people in the age of 18 to 19 read that, they're going to go in thinking Joe Biden is the party, it belongs to the party of desegregation and anti-slavery, when that's not the point.
And that small bit of misinformation will trickle down to all their friends. And
So, when you have so many younger people ecstatic and excited about the things that AOC says, not realizing that, and I don't want to attack her as an individual, I'm sure she's a nice individual personally, but her politics are nonsensical and rudimentary, and quite frankly, they're asinine to say the least. It's like a child, an 8-year-old child, crying and complaining that they can't stay up past 10 p.m. and get their ice cream. And when you try to explain them why you can't do that, you're trying to give structure so that when they become older, they're a part of society in a sense that, they're productive. That's not what comes out of AOC's mouth. Usually what comes out of her mouth is, hyperbolic vitriol that makes no sense. She wanted to create a Green Deal that would, bankrupt the economy. And quite frankly, even if we went with that new Green Deal, the world's economy couldn't even pay for it.
right.
So I do think that we need to get more people voting. And that's what I will say the Democrats and the left do. They get out there and they motivate people to vote. They get in partnerships with MTV News to rock the vote. But the problem with that is they don't go out there and say, hey, I don't know if you're going to be a Republican or a conservative, a liberal, a Democrat, or a libertarian or whatever, but please get out and vote. They literally go, hey, go rock the vote. Here's a sign up for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I think that with most generations, even my generation, tend to be jaded. We think we know everything, and we start off in our lives as very anarchist, liberal Democrats, and as we get older, we tend to realize that we have to pay taxes, pay bills, the way life really is. And actually, it takes failure, or when you go work, 40 hours in a week, you think you're making $10 an hour, they take out your taxes and your FICA and your Social Security, and you realize you only make $6.25 an hour. All of a sudden, you're not really a liberal anymore,
Right.
wanting to give welfare to everyone, abortion to everyone, because they don't realize that nothing is free. It all comes from taxpayers. We are the taxpayers. They are the taxpayers. So I do like the idea of getting out there, hitting the campuses, and trying to get more people motivated to vote. But I think that's where we make a folly at, is most people that are going to vote are probably 26 to 56, instead of hitting the college campuses, where I'm going to be honest, that's a lost cause.
Yeah.
Most of the teachers and professors there push a liberal agenda, an anti-American agenda, and those individuals in college are pretty much lost to any type of political movement, left or right, until they get out to the real world and figure it out. But even then, there's only a 50-50 chance they're going to figure that out. You could go to college and get a loan for, lesbian dance interpretation, a liberal arts degree, and figure out that you paid, $50,000 to $60,000 for a degree that won't get you a job anywhere. Nowhere, not even in a different country. Or you could be the same individual that gets a CPA degree or an MBA and get out of college, pay the same amount of money, and go right into the workforce. The problem isn't that colleges are overpaid or these individuals have, an exorbitant amount of student debt they can't pay. The problem is they picked a profession that doesn't pay, and they picked a college degree that is relatively meaningless. To be honest with you, any liberal arts degree in America has less value than a tech degree, like from here locally, Meridian Technical Institute. You can become a plumber, an electrician, and make $20 to $30 an hour in 10 years after you go through, being a journeyman and stuff. Or you could pay all that money and hope that you can teach lesbian dance interpretation. But let's be honest, those things don't exist. I heard years ago that OSU used to offer their college students underwater basket weaving.
I did hear about that.
Now, I understand. I played college football and I played sports, and most athletes, tend to take easy things. That's why almost everyone in the NBA has a communications degree, because it's a simple degree that it doesn't take much to get. And you can still have some sort of career afterwards. Shaq uses his, he's on TNT. So there's a possibility of doing that. But most athletes, NFL, NBA, they tend to get communication degrees, which are relatively worthless. In a sense that I used to joke with my former boss, you got this communication degrees, but you don't know sign language, you don't know German.
Oh, no.
You can't write code. What kind of communication do you really know how to do? And he's like, you're a jerk. Let's change the subject.
Yeah.
But I do
hear
like
that.
the idea of getting out there to vote. But the problem with that is the people that we're getting to vote are very uneducated, misinformed, and more importantly, the people that I would like to get to vote, which would be conservative Americans, honestly feel after 8 years of being oppressed by Obama that their voice isn't going to count. And even when I was younger, before I was allowed to vote, I used to think to myself, if everyone that said my vote didn't count were to vote, they would have the largest voice in America.
Yeah.
They would be unstoppable. Their will would be indomitable. So it doesn't happen that way, though. People get disenfranchised about voting because, like for myself, I was almost for years. Being from Northern California, I lived in Nancy Pelosi's district.
Oh,
For
wow.
years, my family, I'm a fourth generation Madera, California, from Madera County, and my county has never been anything other than red. Even if you look at the map of 2016 and you break it down by county, yes, majority of California was blue, but not my county. It's always been red. But it doesn't do any good when, for 28 years we've been voting against her. My entire county's conservative. The county north of me is conservative. But the high concentration of liberal Democrats in the San Francisco Bay Area counterbalances and votes us out. So I'm like, why should I vote when my vote doesn't count?
Right.
Furthermore, she gets on stage and says, my constituents. I might be a part of your constituency, but A, I'm not your constituent, and you don't speak for me.
Yeah.
Even people fail to forget with President Trump, he may have won the electoral college, but there was still close to, let's say, 52 million Americans that didn't vote for him.
Yeah.
So out of 100 or 365 plus minus million Americans, we only had roughly 110 million Americans voting. And even if you take away the people who are not qualified to vote, you're underage, you're illegal, you're a felon, you're still dealing with 60% of Americans that have been disenfranchised with voting.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with more of a city and local,
Right.
on their city and local municipalities than it does a state or federal. But when, you vote for individuals thinking that, hey, I'm voting for I'm going to use President Trump as an example. I voted for President Trump for some of the things that he stood for, halting illegal immigration, protecting our borders, aka the wall, stopping the encroachment and threat of China on our economy, and the physical threat from North Korea, and ending the Affordable Care Act. Everything that I voted for President Trump, he has done, which has guaranteed me to re-vote for him come
stuff.
2020. Now, in the past, I voted for people, Langford, other states, Governor Perry when I lived in Texas, who will say one thing, and then once they get elected, realize they have to answer to the people who helped elect them, the lobbyists,
Yeah.
the investors, and not the constituent. And then I'm like, hey, I voted for this guy, and now he's totally against whatever I do.
Mm-hmm.
The correct attitude would be to, okay, I'm going to vote come November, vote him out, further my agenda. But more times than not, people just give up on voting, and that's what's unfortunate.
Well, the newest thing with the Supreme Court going through the Electoral College and saying that they don't have the discretion that they had claimed to have had, and that now the states are allowed to apply a penalty or a punishment towards an Electoral College who doesn't vote in the same meaning as a popular vote.
Now, that would be awesome for conservatives. Because if you live in a Democratic-run state like a California, Oregon, Washington, New York, wherever, you have people that might say that, well, I feel since I live in this state, I'm going to send my votes over to Hillary Clinton, even though that didn't happen. Even last year and I think this has more to do with last year, or 4 years ago's primary in the Democratic Party, where Hillary Clinton had clearly lost some electoral votes or delegates, and they were sent over to Hillary Clinton. I think more times than not, people need to understand, though, that the Electoral College should not be directly tied to the popular vote.
That's the purpose to it.
That's exactly the reason why, because so to punish the electoral individuals, what does that mean exactly? What are you going to fine them?
From the previous time that it had happened, they had I think it was like a couple of $1,000 fines is what happened. And
So that's not going to even change anything either, because most delegates in the Electoral College goes down by party line, and the RNC or DNC will just pay those penalties.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to matter. I think that the fact that it was, for the first time in a very long time,
To start to reform.
and voted on unanimously shows that for once that our Supreme Court can actually do what we send them to do. But more importantly, I don't agree with it per se. I think that the fact that we have the Electoral College goes to show that our framers had enough foresight to protect, again, Kansas from and Oklahoma and Nebraska from California, New York, and largely populated states. So I guess I can understand why they did what they did. I don't have to agree with it. I don't agree with Roe v. Wade either. So you
Right.
got to do what you have to do. I respect the ideal of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, but it's imperfect, just like all the other two branches of our government are. So I also don't like, what scares me the most about the 2020 impending election isn't so much that President Trump could not be reelected. It's the fact that Joe Biden has already said that he's going to restructure the Supreme Court to put more liberal justices on
Right.
there. They've done that in the past.
Uh-huh.
And, I think
Donald Trump was just now taking care of that, getting more of the judges reelected and getting replaced.
It's not going to be very easy to do either way. The only way for that really to happen is them to reclaim the Senate to go with the House, but I don't see that happen. If anything, I personally feel that the Democrats are going to lose the House, and just like when President Trump was elected, the House, the Senate, and the White House will all be conservative again. I think a lot of people feel most of the time they want to believe that they're liberal and they want to believe that they're progressive.
Mm-hmm.
But when push comes to shove and you actually see how the progressive movement works, you're like, wait a minute, that's kind of counterintuitive to what the American dream is. And I think that what most people don't understand, and this is going to be very unpopular, but the reason why Donald Trump was elected was 8 years of Obama, 8 years of
Right. Yeah.
a administration telling middle America, regardless of what color, what political party you belong to, what religion, or what what you believe in, he constantly told Americans that we will never be great again. The manufacturing industry is gone. Unemployment will remain at 5% or above. If you live in the middle of America, you're a Bible-thumping, gun-toting, this, and that. Like, first of all, that's something to be ashamed of. That's something to be embarrassed of.
Yeah, right.
So Trump being elected in 2016 was a direct pushback. Yes, there was a lot of people voting specifically against Hillary Clinton, but there were a lot of people who just felt like they weren't being represented enough, and they got out and vote. I think regardless of the last several months with the corona virus kind of running amok on the economy, and I think a lot of people feel that President Trump's possibility of being reelected has decreased, but I'm actually going to double down and say he's probably going to win by a landslide that hasn't been seen since the '84 re-election of President Reagan, when I think he won all but one state in the Electoral College. I think there's a lot more Americans, especially minorities, of Jewish, African American, Hispanic, Asian descent, who are just not vocal enough to say they're going to vote for Trump because they're going to be called a pejorative, a race traitor, an Uncle Tom.
Right.
They don't know what they're talking about. And what's funny is the people who say this are the most uneducated people. So it's odd that the most uneducated people are the ones trying to call other people the most intolerant. And I'm like, why does it seem like, what did I tell you the other day? The people who shake at the gates of tolerance are the most intolerant.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you said. So since we just touched on that note about the PC culture kind of thing, what do you feel about, have you been paying attention to sports?
Of course.
How do you feel about all these name changes and logo changes that they're being threatened at, pressure being applied to make those changes?
Well, I will touch on one particular sport before I move on to the other one. So the first one I'm going to say is the NFL. The idea that they want to change the name of the Redskins. First of all, Oklahoma, the word Oklahoma means land of the red man. So are we going to change the name of Oklahoma next?
Man, that's
So
good.
why
Good
is it if we
point.
see an African American, we'll call him black, but if we say Native American, we can't call him red? How can we live in Oklahoma, which at one time state motto was Native America? We currently live in the Iowa Nation right now, Stillwater. I haven't seen one Native American come in here complain about that.
Oh no. Yeah.
All the only people I see complaining about the name Redskin are urban white women and liberal men. People that don't apply to them. Don't tell me Redskin offends you, but if it doesn't offend a Native American, then stop with that.
Right.
I know a lot of Native Americans here in Oklahoma who go out of their way to buy Redskins gear because that represents them. On their logo is a Native American.
Yep.
If someone looks at the Redskin logo and sees a racial emblem, that makes you a racist, because I don't look at that. I look at it and saying, wow, that's a team that supports Native America, Native Americana. So I don't like the idea of Dan Snyder caving to possibly changing the name. But personally, as a Dallas Cowboy fan, I hate the Redskins, so I don't care what they become. I'm going to hate them either way.
Good stuff. All right.
Now, moving on to the NBA, I don't like the idea of let me go back to the NFL one more time. First of all, we as a country, we stand behind one song. It's called the Star Spangled Banner. It's the national anthem. It applies to every race, creed, and culture that belongs in this country, past, present, and future. We have one national anthem. And the fact that the NFL is claiming they're going to, and I've never heard of this before the first game of every kickoff of every week one this year, they're going to play the black national anthem.
Right.
First of all, that's segregation and racism in itself. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King didn't take a bullet to desegregate this country for modern PC America to resegregate it. I don't like the ideal of the term black community. We have one community. If you want to separate yourself from the rest of us, then fine, I'm going to look at you as a racist and a bigot because you don't want to be a part of the bigger picture. Growing up in the 80s, I was taught heavily that you don't look at people by the color of their skin. You judge them by their morals and their character. So if that's the case, then I don't see racism where everyone else does. When what happened to Mr. Floyd, which was a terrible thing, happened, never once did I look at that video and go, oh my God. What I said specifically was, I just saw those police brutally murder a man. But that's not what most America says. The media narrative is white cops killed a black man.
Right.
That's everything in that statement's racist. I'm sorry.
It is, yes.
Once you bring race into something, it becomes a racist movement. The fact that Don Lemon got in an argument with Terry Crews 2 nights ago saying that Black Lives Matter doesn't mean all Black Lives Matter, just against police brutality, goes to show what kind of racist movement that is. Do I believe that the movement itself is racist? Not necessarily, but I believe the ideal behind it is. I believe it's fascist if I want to say that all lives matter and you call me a racist because you say that black lives matter. The fact that you put the word black into that statement makes it a racist statement.
Exactly.
So I don't like the idea. If anything, they're lucky I'm not an NFL player because I would kneel for the black national anthem and stand for the other, just to make those people realize how hurtful and how offensive it is. The only way for the BLM movement to understand how offensive and hurtful it is for Colin Kaepernick or any American to take a knee during the national anthem, they'll know once Americans start taking a knee during the black national anthem, because that's the first thing I would do. Because they're going to get mad.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if it does happen.
Oh, it's not going to happen because they will be called racist and bigots and all the pejoratives you don't want to be called. That's what modern day fascism is.
I was thinking if it might have been one of the black players who were going to do it.
Now, that's what should happen.
That's what should happen.
We should have, because that's the other thing I get upset, especially about the BLM movement, is they want to think that all black should be involved in it, and it's not. That's a blanketed an idea. That's like saying all whites are in the KKK or all whites are racist. If it wasn't for whites in the first place to vote for desegregation, the 440,000 plus Union soldiers to die to free black slaves, that goes to show you that black lives have mattered in America since at least 1862, the beginning of the American Civil War. Furthermore, black lives continue to matter throughout history when We tried to literally ban the KKK in the 40s as a terrorist organization when we marched with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from Selma to Montgomery after seeing those racist police officers attack unarmed civilians, everyday Americans, everyday white, Latino, Native Americans, Jewish Americans stood up and marched with them. Black lives have always mattered in the United States. And when I hear Black Lives Matter, the statement, what I hear is Black Lives Matter used to, but they don't anymore. And I just don't believe in that.
Right.
I don't believe that I live in a world where everyone's a bigot, a homophobic, a racist, this, or that. Furthermore, I believe that if they are, that's their right to be. Who are you? If we really want to live in a country, we're not supposed to judge blacks or whites for being, militant or racist, then we can't judge racist for being racist. They have a right to be a racist as much as I have a right to be a Judeo-Christian or, someone from the Middle East coming here and being a Muslim.
That's true.
You have a right to be LGBTQ.
That's the purpose to America.
That's right. And that's what people want to try to do is they want to try to tell you that racism is evil, so we need to stomp out racism. Racism is an ideology. It's not nothing specific. It's not nothing material. Like, I'm sorry, the rebel flag in itself can't be racist because an inanimate object can't be racist.
Exactly.
I, as a Jew, can look at the swastika and not be offended. I'm not scared of it. Why? Because 80 years later, we're still here and they're not.
Exactly. Man, good praise. Good.
So, I don't understand why a lot of these people nowadays want to, and we have a lot of people trying to make points, and I understand they think that they're, fighting for a powerful cause with BLM. We do have police brutality in America, but I can't speak from the African American community because I'm not African American, and I can't speak for their experiences. But as a mixed American who is white, Latino, Jewish, Armenian, Native American, so on and so forth, I know what it's like to be oppressed by police. I know what it's like to be singled out. And it's not just a color thing. A lot of times what it is if you don't commit a crime, the police have no reason to interact with you. I've lived in Stillwater 7 years. I've never even so much gotten pulled over a ticket. Why? Because I don't commit crimes.
Yeah.
I also noticed that most of the people that are screaming about police brutality are criminals or family members of criminals. You don't hear me screaming about police brutality because my family isn't brutalized by the police because they're not criminals. What a novel idea.
What a novel idea. I hear that.
Now, I digress. I do have a problem with the NBA putting on their courts Black Lives Matter because, again, I don't think Black Lives Matter is just a movement to end police brutality. I believe it's 100% a political movement.
Oh, it is.
And I don't want to see no abortion or pro-life stickers on the NBA court too. I use the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, NASCAR, Premier Soccer. I use those things to get away from the
hectic politics out of my free time.
Hecticness of this world. Exactly. So when I, tune into the NFL, that's 3 hours, 2.5 hours of a getaway. I forget about Donald Trump, North Korea, Iraq, slavery, the economy, COVID-19. So I don't like the ideal of that. I don't like the ideal of Major League Baseball talking about doing away with the national anthem.
Yes.
I don't like the ideal of large corporations caving to a minority group of angry, individuals when majority of their fans don't agree with that. I was very ecstatic to hear that the owner of my favorite NFL team, the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, has said, you're not going to be kneeling on my club. If you want to stay in the locker room during the national anthem, please. And people are like, well, he doesn't have that right. Last time I looked, he's the employer.
Well, and not only that, it wasn't until 2009 that the sports started getting paid by our U.S. tax dollars to do the national anthem in support of the military. and that was coming out at millions of dollars per team doing it, and that's what forced them not to go out there and do it. So in retrospect, if they did want to stay in the locker room, that's exactly the way it originally was before they were forced to come out and go and stand at the national anthem in support of the military out of our tax-paying
Well,
dollars.
the problem is our culture has changed where people feel that America's evil, the old glory is a racist, imperialistic image. So they don't want to stand for the national anthem. They don't want to put their hand or say the Pledge of Allegiance, not realizing that everything that they're doing is given to them by individuals who went and fought for that right. May it be for the Revolutionary War or, tangent wars like World War II or World War I. I don't necessarily say Korea or Vietnam because I don't think those were more political wars. Those weren't
No, you're right.
to, end fascism, Nazism, or imperialistic Japan. But I also do understand that they were fighting a communist ideology there.
Mm-hmm.
But most wars in this country were fought to protect our way of life or to further our way of life. And again, if you look at the American flag or hear the national anthem and think negative thoughts, that's in your heart. That's how you were taught. That's your culture.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't represent America.
No, of course not.
The idea that BLM wants to protest police brutality, I respect that, and I actually support that part of their movement. But to say things, to get further political and say that, America was never great, again, I want to remind people that only one time in world human history has a free man ever fought for the freedom of an enslaved person. That's only exclusive to American history. No one from Greece went to try to free the Jews from the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians didn't have a civil war to free the Jews. So the fact that we say America was never great, that separates us from all other cultures that's ever been on this planet. We put a man on the moon. Right. That's pretty great. We connected 2 oceans during Teddy Roosevelt's presidency. That's pretty great. The Panama Canal, not only was that great and a great achievement of human ingenuity, but after our 99-year lease was up, we gave it to the Panamanians. We didn't ask for money. We didn't ask for, exclusive rights. We just gave it back. Hell, when the British gave back Hong Kong to the Chinese said that we will let Hong Kong be autonomous for 50 years. They just voted last week that Hong Kong's now officially part of mainland China. So, the Chi-Coms can't even keep their commitments to the British, although we as a country can keep our commitments to the Panamanians.
And they want to say we're not great.
We also changed the quality of life for people. If it wasn't for Mr. Carrier creating air conditioning, the world would be a terrible place. The fact that we've created vaccines, cures for diseases, we have revolutionized things like infrastructure, bridges. America, by far and away, is the greatest country on the face of the earth. Are we perfect? No, but no country has ever been perfect. If America was so terrible, racist, and xenophobic, then why do we still have 5 to 10 million illegal aliens every year? If you go to any country on the face of the earth, even Canada, they'll tell you they'd love to come to America.
Yeah.
They don't have things like freedom of speech. You go to the United Kingdom, who is one of our most staunchest and loyal allies, you speak out against Muslim, that's a hate crime.
Right, yep.
So you want to say America is not great? The fact that you can stand up in public and speak against the government without fear of oppression goes to show you how America great is.
Yeah.
Try that stuff in Venezuela. Try that in North Korea.
Yeah.
Try that in
North
Korea.
Korea. That's never slighted.
Try that in Iran or Libya or any of these, militant Muslim countries.
Yeah.
The world is a very tumultuous place. But what I hear a lot from atheists and non-believers, if there's really a God, then why is there so much evil and misery in the world? That's not God's doing. All the evil and misery in this world is by our own hand.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't blame God for what you do. That's literally like going, sir, you raped and murdered this woman. Why? Well, the devil made me do it. That shit doesn't stand in court, and neither does, well, the world, God doesn't exist or the world wouldn't be evil. The evil in man's heart is what makes the world evil. The intolerance of men is what makes the world intolerant. So I really expect that the NHL, for instance, they don't plan on putting Black Lives Matter on their ice. There's no way to take a knee on the ice there. How about this? The NHL is so respectful of other cultures that when we play Canada, it doesn't matter, even if it's two American teams, we do both national anthems.
Right. And soccer does the same thing.
When we
International
have the
soccer.
All-Star game and we play World All-Stars, it's the U.S. versus the world. We'll play the Canadian, the Swiss, the, whatever the foreign members of our NHL are part of, we'll play their national anthem.
Well, you know what's crazy is that I had just said soccer does that too, but just this last women's national soccer, the U.S. won, and one of the co-captain, I believe it was, the spokeswoman for the U.S. national soccer team said, "We are not going to go to the fucking White House."
That was Megan Rapinoe.
Yes,
who,
Rapinoe, however you say
What
it.
I've noticed with her is she has a very radical agenda that's misguided and misbased. And I don't want to get on this and digress from our current subject, but she fights for LGBT rights. And last time I looked, to equate the LGBT movement with the civil rights movement is a false equation. Gays were never forced to sit at the back of the bus. They were never forced to use a different restroom, eat at a different table. They've never been not allowed to vote. Gays and lesbians have always been allowed to vote. There's been laws to protect gays and lesbians as far as the workplace for 30 or 40 years. You get fired or lose your job or get hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines if you fire someone for being gay, for being black, for being overweight, for being too old. So the LGBT movement in itself is much like third wave feminism. It's just a bunch of people running their mouth because they got what they want. And the problem is they got to the finish line, they got everything they want, but they're still militant people.
They still want the attention too.
That's right. So, as you know, I am very tolerant and welcoming to the LGBT community in my personal life and my business, because at the end of the day, I don't care what color, what religion, or what sexuality you have. This is America, and you have a right to do business with whomever you want, whenever you want, however you want. Well, I'm the owner and proprietor of Thumper's Paradise here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. We run a vapor lounge. We offer the best prices in town, always MSRP. Our goal isn't to get you to quit your addiction to nicotine, just try to find you a safer alternative. We are located at 211 South Main Street here in Stillwater, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and all the rest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thumper.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to trying to do this again.